Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is the Chancellor's fourth budget, but one thing unites them all. Every budget he comes to this House and things are worse, not better for this country. Compared to last year's budget, growth last year, down. Growth this year, down. Growth next year, down. Growth in 2015, down. And all he offers is more of the same. Higher borrowing, lower growth, and more of the...
Order! I think, in fairness, and quite rightly, I expected the Chancellor to be heard. I certainly expect the Leader of the Opposition to be given the same courtesy. Miliband.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, they don't think growth matters, but people in this country do. And all he offers is more of the same, a more of the same budget from a downgraded Chancellor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Britain deserves better than this. And I do have to say to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he almost need not have bothered coming to the House, because the whole budget, including the market-sensitive fiscal forecasts, were in the Standard before he rose to his feet. And look...
Order! I cannot understand an opposition that doesn't want to hear their own leader. In the same way that the opposition didn't want to hear the Chancellor, the one thing I can guarantee that the people in this country want to hear what the honourable gentleman has got to say. Miliband.
To be fair to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm sure he didn't intend the whole of the budget to be in the Standard before he rose to his feet, and I hope he will investigate and report back to the House. Now, what did the Prime Minister declare late last year? And I quote, "The good news will keep coming." And what did the Chancellor tell us today? Under this government, the bad news just doesn't stop. Back in June 2010, he told us in his budget and he promised a steady and sustained recovery. He was wrong. We've had the slowest recovery for 100 years. Last year, he said in the budget, there will be no double-dip recession. He was wrong, there was. He told us a year ago, growth would be 2%. He was wrong. Now he says it will be just 0.6%. He told us next year, growth will be 2.7%. Wrong again, just 1.8%. Wait for tomorrow, the Chancellor says, and I will be vindicated. But with this Chancellor, tomorrow never comes. He's the wrong man in the wrong place at the worst possible time for the country. It's a downgraded budget from a downgraded Chancellor. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, he has secured one upgrade this year, travelling first class on a second-class ticket from Crewe to London.
I don't want to keep repeating myself. I expect, and quite rightly, the public expect to hear the Leader of the Opposition, and I've got to say to the government benches, you also must listen to the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the only time the country's felt all in it together was when the Chancellor was booed by 80,000 people at the Paralympic Games. I've got some advice for the Chancellor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, stay away from the Cup final, even if Chelsea get there. And who is paying the price for the Chancellor's failure? Britain's families. In his first budget, he predicted that living standards would rise over the Parliament. But wages are flat, prices are rising, and Britain's families are squeezed. And what the Chancellor didn't tell us is that the Office of Budget Responsibility has already confirmed the British people will be worse off in 2015 than they were in 2010. It's official, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You're worse off under the Tories. Worse off year after year after year. And wasn't there an extraordinary omission from his speech, Mr. Deputy Speaker? No mention of the AAA rating. What the Prime Minister called the mark of trust, which he told us had been secured. The Chancellor said it would be a humiliation for Britain to be downgraded. So not just a downgraded Chancellor, but a humiliated Chancellor too, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And what about borrowing? The Chancellor made the extraordinary claim in his budget speech, that he was on course. Mr. Deputy Speaker, even he can't believe this nonsense. Debt is higher in every year of this Parliament than he forecast at the last budget. He's going to borrow £200 billion more than he planned. And what did he say in his June 2010 budget? He set two very clear benchmarks, and I quote. He said, "We are on track to have debt falling and a balanced structural current budget by 2014-15. Or, as he called it, our 4-year plan." So this was the deal he offered the British people, Mr. Deputy Speaker. These were the terms. 4 years of pain, tax rises, and the Prime Minister says from a sedentary position, borrow more. You are borrowing more! And who said it? And he just needs to look down the road, because the business secretary was asked, and he said, we are borrowing more, from his own business secretary. So these were the terms. These were the terms. I'd keep quiet if I were you. These were the terms. 4 years of pain, tax rises and spending cuts, and the public finance would be sorted. So today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he should have been telling us just one more year of sacrifice. In 12 months, the good times will roll. Job done, mission accomplished, election plan underway. But 3 years on, what does he say? Exactly what he said 3 years ago. We still need 4 more years of pain, tax rises and spending cuts. In other words, after all the misery, all the harsh medicine, all the suffering by the British people, 3 years, no progress, deal broken, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Same old Tories, and all he offers is more of the same. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's as if they really do believe their own propaganda, that the failure is nothing to do with them. And we've heard all the excuses. We've heard all the excuses. The snow, the royal wedding, the Jubilee, the Eurozone, and now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they're turning on each other. The Prime Minister, what did the Prime Minister say last weekend? And I quote, he said this: "Let the message go out from this hall and this party. We are here to fight." Mr. Deputy Speaker, they're certainly doing that. The business secretaries turned on the Chancellor, the Home Secretaries turned on the Prime Minister, and the Education Secretaries turned on her. The whole country can see what's going on. The blame game has begun in the Cabinet. The truth is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor is lashed to the mast, not because of his judgment, but because of pride. Not because of the facts, but because of ideology. And why does he stay in his job? Not because the country wants him, not because the party wants him, but because he is the Prime Minister's last line of defence. The Bullingdon boys really are both in it together. And they don't understand. You need a recovery made by the many, not just a few at the top. It's a year now since the omni-shambles budget. We've had U-turns on charities, on churches, on caravans, and yes, on pasties. But what is the one policy they are absolutely committed to? The top-rate tax cut. Mr. Deputy Speaker, John the banker, remember him. He's had a tough year, earning £1 million. And what does he get? He gets a tax cut of £42,500 next year. £42,500, double the average wage. Now, his colleague, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let's call him George, his colleague has done a little better, bringing home £5 million a year. What does he get as a tax cut? I know the Prime Minister doesn't like to hear what he agreed to. What does he get? A tax cut of nearly £250,000. And at the same time, everyone else is paying the price. The Chancellor is giving with one hand and taking far more away with the other. Hard-working families hit by the Strivers tax, pensioners hit by the granny tax, disabled people hit by the bedroom tax, millions paying more so that millionaires can pay less. Now, the Chancellor mentioned childcare in his speech. He wants a round of applause for cutting £7 billion in help for families this Parliament and offering £700 million of help in the next. But what are the families who are waiting for that childcare help told? They've got to wait over 2 years for the help to arrive. But for the richest in society, they just have to wait 2 weeks for the millionaire's tax cut to kick in. That is David Cameron's Britain. And of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, still the Prime Minister refuses to tell us, despite repeated questions, about whether he's getting the 50p tax cut. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he's getting embarrassed now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you can see. He's had a year to think about it. He's had a year to think about it. He must have done the maths. Even he should have worked it out by now. So come on, nod your head if you're getting the 50p tax rate. They ask...
Order. The House must come to order. Let us hear the Leader of the Opposition.
No, I'm not getting the 50p tax rate. I'm asking whether the Prime Minister is. Come on, answer. After all, he's the person that said sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let transparency win the day. Now, let's try something else. What about the rest of the Cabinet? Are they getting the 50p tax? Okay. Hands up if you're not getting the 50p tax cut. Come on, hands up. Come on.
Order. Okay, we're all right. The honourable gentleman wishes to take a cup of tea, so it may be a little more silent. Ed Miliband.
Come on, hands up. Just put your hand up if you're not getting the 50p tax cut. They're obviously... they don't like it, do they? At last, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Cabinet are united with a simple message. Thanks, George. He's cutting taxes for them while raising them on everyone else. Now, the Chancellor announced some measures today that he said would boost growth, just like he does every year. And every year they fail. I could mention the National Loan Guarantee Scheme. He trumpeted that last year, and then he abolished it.
Order. Mr. Mosley, I think your voice could be better saved for Chester FC this weekend. As the top of the league, I think you'd be better off cheering them on. Ed Miliband.
He trumpeted the National Loan Guarantee Scheme. And then he abolished it just 4 months later. The Funding for Lending Scheme that he said would transform the prospects for small businesses. The work programme that is worse than doing nothing. And today he talked a lot about housing. And the Prime Minister said this in 2011. He launched his so-called housing strategy. And in his own understated way, he labelled it a radical and unashamedly ambitious strategy. He said it would give the housing industry a shot in the arm and help 100,000 people to buy their own homes. 18 months later, Mr. Deputy Speaker, how many families have been helped? Not 100,000, not even 10,000, just 1,500 people out of 100,000 promised. That's 98,500 broken promises. For all the launches, strategies and plans, housing completions are now at their lowest level since the 1920s, and 130,000 jobs lost in construction. It's a failing economic plan from a failing Chancellor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor has failed the test of the British people. Growth, living standards and hope. But he has not just failed their tests, he has failed on his own as well. All he has to offer is this more of the same budget. Today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor joined Twitter. He could have got it all into 140 characters. Growth down, borrowing up, families hit, and millionaires laughing all the way to the bank. Hashtag downgraded Chancellor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, more of the same is not the answer to the problems of the last 3 years. More of the same is the answer of a downgraded Chancellor in a downgraded government. Britain deserves better than this.
A vigorous response from Ed Miliband for Labour, and we'll be back in the Commons